The ZTE Axon 40 Ultra and the Vivo X80 Pro are two flagship smartphones released by Chinese manufacturers in 2022. Both phones have the same chipset, the same fast charging, and display size. But there are noticeable differences between these two Vivo phones. So, between the Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro, which should you purchase? In this video, I'll compare the specs and features of the ZTE Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro side by side, to help you know which you should purchase. At the end of this video, you should know which of these phones to buy and why. The Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro have completely different looks. Looking at both phones from a distance, you can tell the difference between them. But a closer look will show you that the 6.8-inch screen size of the Axon 40 Ultra is smaller than the 6.78-inch of the Vivo X80 Pro. Aside from the display size, other features of the display are also different. Both phones make use of an AMOLED panel, support for 120Hz refresh rate, HDR10+. But the screen resolution is different. For example, Axon 40 Ultra has 1116 by 2480 pixels, while its competitor has 1440 by 3200 pixels. Thus, there will also be differences in pixel density. These are 400 ppi and 517 ppi for ZTE and Vivo, respectively. Even the build and rear modules of both phones are different. When it comes to durability and protection, only the Vivo X80 Pro has an IP68 water and dust resistant rating. Unfortunately, ZTE does not provide water protection. Also, ZTE continues to heavily promote its under-display selfie camera engineering, with a 16-megapixel shooter. The Axon 40 Ultra promises top-notch selfies like the front cameras of other flagship phones. Speaking of competitor, the Vivo X80 Pro has a drill hole through the screen for the 32-megapixel front-facing camera. In the camera segment, Vivo has 4 camera modules on the rear panel, while ZTE has triple camera modules. One of the highlights of the Vivo phone is the camera. The Duo has Zeiss optics with the newest camera sensors. The X80 Pro gets a 50-megapixel Samsung GNV1G lens, a 48-megapixel ultra-wide sensor, a 12-megapixel portrait unit, and an 8-megapixel periscope lens. Meanwhile, the rear camera setup of the Axon 40 Ultra brings a triple 64-megapixel camera, with the wide and ultra-wide modules using a customized Sony IMX787 sensor. It is assisted by a 64-megapixel Sony IMX787 ultra-wide camera, and an OIS-enabled 64-megapixel telephoto periscope camera. The rear camera setup is assisted by a flicker sensor, a TOF sensor, and a tri microphone setup for audio zoom and audio recognition. Both the Vivo X Note and Vivo X80 Pro have support for 5G connectivity, and both phones also have the same performance. The reason why the performance of both phones is the same is that both phones feature the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 5G chip. With the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 5G chipset on board, both smartphones have the same CPU cores, the same GPU, the same ISP, etc. So, when it comes to gaming and graphics-intensive tasks, you'll get the same performance using the ZTE Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro. The RAM inside the Axon 40 Ultra and X80 Pro is 8 or 12 gigs RAM, but ZTE has additional 16 gigs version RAM. The minimum internal storage capacity on both phones is 256 gigs, and the maximum internal storage capacity on X80 Pro is 512 gigs, and Axon 40 Ultra is 1 TB memory. None of these phones have space for storage expansion via microSD card. Both the ZTE Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro boots on Android 12 out of the box, but with different custom skins. Vivo is promising years of major software updates and security patches for this device. Vivo will be upgrading both phones up to the Android 15 OS. But I don't have information from ZTE about its updates. I hope it will also be available. The Axon 40 Ultra is powered by a 5000 mAh battery, with support for an 80-watt fast charge, while the Vivo X80 Pro is powered by a 4700 mAh battery with support for an 80-watt fast charge. The Vivo phone has support for a 50-watt fast wireless charging solution, but ZTE has no wireless charging support. The ZTE Axon 40 Ultra has a bigger battery and will last longer, but will also take a little longer time to fully charge. The price of the ZTE Axon 40 Ultra with 8 and 256 gigs storage option is about $743, and the 8 and 256 gigs storage option of the Vivo X80 Pro is priced at $999. The Vivo X80 Pro is the more expensive device among these two. But does that mean it's the better device for you to get? Let's find out from our verdict. So, between the ZTE Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro, which should you purchase? Well, this comes down to what you need a smartphone for. Allow me to explain. In most cases, Axon 40 Ultra and Vivo X80 Pro are different phones. For example, despite the fact that their screen size is identical, the resolution is different, and in our comparison, the Vivo model will be better. I also like the presence of IP68 dust or water resistance in the Vivo X80 Pro, but you will not find any protection in the Axon 40 Ultra. On the other hand, the model from ZTE has a better camera, 3 sensors with 64 megapixel resolution. But the Vivo X80 Pro will have a better selfie camera, with a resolution of 32 megapixels versus 16 megapixels for the Axon 40 Ultra under the screen. I can also highlight that the Axon 40 Ultra received smaller dimensions and weight than the competitor from Vivo. Also, the battery capacity of ZTE is slightly more than 5000 mAh, while Vivo X80 Pro has only 4700 mAh. Both models have identical 80-watt fast charging, but only Vivo has wireless charging. As for the price, you can see that the smartphone from ZTE Axon 40 Ultra costs less than the Vivo X80 Pro. But this is not surprising, since Vivo has more features than ZTE. I think this comparison was useful for you. If so, press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have a nice day and see you soon.